So, I think about this for a second. Have you ever been in an argument where both sides are just, completely banging their heads against a wall?
Oh, yeah. Like all the time.
Right. I mean, you know the exact feeling I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You were trying to, force the other person to submit, and they're just digging their heels in.
Yep.
And the harder you push with perfectly logical facts, the more intensely they resist.
Yeah.
It is just, it's utterly exhausting.
It really is because, whether it's a dispute over a corporate contract or, I don't know, a fight with a contractor over a kitchen remodel.
Or just like a holiday dinner debate with a super stubborn relative.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
We almost always default to treating conflict like it's some sort of wrestling match.
We really do. But what if the secret to actually winning that argument wasn't about pushing harder?
Right.
What if the actual secret was getting the other person to, volunteer your solution as if it were their own brilliant idea all along?
Which is honestly a complete paradigm shift. I mean, most of us view conflict as a contest of strength, like a zero-sum game.
Yeah, one person wins, the other loses.
Exactly. We bring this metaphorical battering ram to every locked door we find, but the material we are looking at today for this deep dive, it completely dismantles that assumption.
It really does.
It proves that the most powerful position in any dispute isn't the one making the demands. It's actually the one coaxing the other side into unlocking the door themselves.
Right, which is just fascinating. So, for today's deep dive, we're pulling from an incredible account provided by a former lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI.
Yeah, this guy was legit.
Oh, totally. This is someone who was in the trenches dealing with, the highest stakes imaginable, and he details the painstaking evolution of modern high-stakes negotiation.
And our mission for you, the listener, today is to fundamentally rewire how you view conflict.
Yes, we want to help you shift away from that whole wrestling match mentality.
Right, to treating it as an exercise in coaxing, co-opting, and creating what this negotiator calls the illusion of control.
The illusion of control. I love that phrase so much. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the way the FBI actually learned this lesson wasn't, in a nice, safe classroom at Quantico.
No, not at all.
It was through a brutal, really tragic reality check that forced them to rethink literally everything they thought they knew about human behavior.
And that reality check takes us far away from a sterile corporate boardroom or a typical domestic dispute.
Right.
It actually takes us to the Philippine jungle in the year 2001.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we need to start here to truly understand the catastrophic consequences of treating a negotiation purely as a zero-sum battle of wills.
Right. So we are looking at the Dos Palmas crisis.
Yes.
In May of 2001, a brutal group of radical Islamists known as the Abu Sayyaf, they raided a private diving resort called Dos Palmas, and they took 20 hostages.
Which is just a massive, chaotic situation right from the jump.
Totally. And among those 20 were 3 Americans. There was a missionary couple from Wichita, Kansas, named Martin and Gracia Burnham, and a California businessman named Guillermo Sabero.
And, immediately the response to this kidnapping just set a disastrous tone.
Yeah. The Philippine president at the time, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, she publicly declared all-out war on the Abu Sayyaf.
Which, and I mean this from a purely behavioral standpoint, is the exact opposite of empathetic discourse.
Right.
It is the absolute antithesis of creating any kind of environment where a safe resolution is even possible.
I mean, I get it, though. I can totally see why a government leader would default to that response.
Oh, for sure.
If you're a head of state facing a terrorist threat, you want to project absolute dominance.
You want to look tough.
Yeah. You want to send a message to your citizens that you are strong and a message to the terrorists that you just won't be bullied.
Right. But the flaw there, the massive flaw, is that political posturing completely ignores the reality on the ground. If your goal is to actually get people out alive, puffing out your chest on national television just corners the kidnappers.
Because it forces them to prove they aren't afraid of you?
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is really about the practical mechanics of communication. I mean, you cannot negotiate in the middle of a firefight.
No, of course not.
When you declare all-out war, you immediately destroy the infrastructure required for dialogue.
Yeah. And the former FBI negotiator explicitly notes that when he arrived in Manila, the Philippine military was literally lobbing bullets, rockets, and, artillery into a hospital complex where the kidnappers and hostages were holed up.
It's just insane. Think about the physiological state of everyone in that compound.
Everyone is terrified.
Exactly. You can't establish rapport, you can't gather intelligence, and you certainly can't de-escalate when the physical environment is exploding all around you. The noise of the guns literally and metaphorically drowns out any possibility of a real conversation.
It sounds like, trying to put out a grease fire by throwing a bucket of water on it.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. Because the instinct is to smother it with force. But the water just superheats, vaporizes, and carries the burning oil everywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't extinguish the flame, it just makes it explode.
And explode it did. Because literally every party involved was operating under that exact same wrestling match mentality.
Yeah, it wasn't just the Philippine military trying to assert dominance over the terrorists.
No, you had turf wars among the Philippine Army and the Marines, which resulted in these completely botched, totally uncoordinated raids.
And then, because American hostages were involved, the CIA, the FBI, and U.S. military intelligence all just drop into Manila.
What a mess.
Right. And the source material highlights that even the U.S. agencies were intensely squabbling among themselves over jurisdiction.
It was basically a perfect storm of dysfunction driven entirely by ego.
Everyone wanted to impose their own will.
Right. The Philippine military wanted to look strong for their president. The various U.S. agencies wanted to be the ones to claim the heroic rescue.
And the Abu Sayyaf naturally wanted to prove they couldn't be intimidated by any of them.
Yeah. When everyone's primary objective is just asserting dominance, the actual problem, which is the safety of the hostages, becomes like a secondary concern.
Which is incredibly tragic.
It really is.
Yeah.
And because of that, the timeline just drags on for months, and the situation gets progressively darker.
Yeah.
9/11 happens right in the middle of this ordeal, which suddenly links Abu Sayyaf to al-Qaeda.
Oh, wow. Which changes everything.
Exactly. That raises the international profile and the geopolitical stakes astronomically. And then there's this moment of just sheer diplomatic incompetence.
Right. The radio show incident?
Yes. A member of the Philippine presidential cabinet actually goes on a live radio talk show with the kidnapper leader, Abu Sayyaf.
Which is just a wild thing to even imagine happening.
I know. And they strike a deal on air to name a Malaysian senator as an official negotiator in exchange for the terrorists not killing a hostage.
But, of course, the atmosphere was already so polluted with posturing and distrust.
Yeah. The kidnappers almost immediately claimed the agreement was broken. And as a result, they brutally beheaded Guillermo Sabero.
It is a tragic, really extreme illustration of what happens when you have literally zero control over the moving parts of a negotiation.
Yeah.
And when your counterparts don't trust a single word you say, there was no foundation of reliability.
But not all.
They were just throwing demands back and forth over this massive wall of hostility.
And the mechanical failure of this approach gets even more absurd, if you can even use that word for such a grim situation.
Yeah.
Because later on, the families actually arrange a ransom drop.
Right.
A private donor puts up $300,000 to buy the Burnhams back. The drop happens, the money is delivered, and the kidnappers refuse to release the hostages.
And the reason why is just mind-boggling.
It really is. The negotiator for the terrorists claimed the payment was short by exactly $600.
$600 out of $300,000.
No, and the FBI team is just completely baffled. They're trying to argue pure logic.
Right, because to them it's just math.
Yeah, they're saying, come on, you won't let hostages go for $600. That's a rounding error. Maybe the courier skimmed it off the top.
But the logic didn't matter at all to the kidnappers. The money was gone, the hostages were still captive, and communication just went back to absolutely zero.
Why do you think that is? Like, why throw away $300,000 over $600?
Because, again, logic does not work when there is no dynamic of trust and cooperation.
Right.
The FBI was trying to argue objective mathematical facts, but the kidnappers were operating purely on emotion, ego, and this perceived slight. To the kidnappers, that missing $600 wasn't an accounting error. It was a blatant sign of disrespect. It was a challenge to their authority.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, when you are locked in a zero-sum battle, any concession, no matter how tiny, feels like a catastrophic defeat.
Which culminates in an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, it does.
After 13 grueling months in the jungle, a squad of Philippine Scout Rangers stumbles across the Abu Sayyaf camp in the woods.
And they don't secure a perimeter. They don't open a dialogue at all.
No. They form a skirmish line and just open fire indiscriminately into the camp.
It's awful.
Martin and Burnham are taking a nap in their hammocks. They fall out, rolling down a muddy hill, just trying to escape the bullets raining down from their so-called rescuers.
Yeah.
Grecia is shot in the leg. Martin is hit in the chest 3 times by friendly fire, and he dies right there in the jungle. A Philippine nurse named Abu Sayyaf is also killed in the crossfire.
And the leader of the kidnappers, Sabaya, he manages to escape the firefight entirely.
It's just devastating.
It was, as the FBI negotiator describes it in the text, the biggest failure of his professional life, a complete, devastating waste of lives and treasure.
Yeah.
But this profound failure was actually the catalyst for a total paradigm shift within the Bureau.
Right. The negotiator describes, just sitting in the dark at home, completely dispirited,
Yeah.
and realizing that if these deaths were going to mean anything at all, the FBI had to fundamentally change how they operated.
They couldn't just keep banging their heads against the wall, relying on authority and logic.
Because the wrestling match was getting people killed.
Exactly. So out of the ashes of Dos Palmas, they start dissecting exactly what went wrong.
And this points us toward an incredibly frustrating discovery regarding a crooked politician, right?
Yes.
Which basically cracks wide open the entire psychological trap the FBI was stuck in.
This is where the psychological analysis in the source material really starts to accelerate.
Okay.
So the negotiator is reviewing the case files post-mortem and discovers this mind-blowing fact that the official task force didn't even know while they were deployed.
Oh, wow. What was it?
Someone had been running a parallel, unauthorized negotiation entirely behind their backs.
Wait, really?
Yeah. A local, notoriously corrupt Philippine politician had managed to get Martin Burnham on the phone to prove he was alive.
Which is like the absolute holy grail in a kidnapping case.
Right.
Getting the hostage on the phone is the ultimate proof of life. And this amateur, sleazy politician managed to do it. And he did it for free. The FBI negotiator is practically tearing his hair out, asking, why was our multi-million-dollar, highly trained task force failing to get a simple phone call, while this amateur succeeded without even trying?
And the answer reveals a massive psychological trap.
I imagine the FBI's entire strategy was rooted in fear, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, the fear of giving the kidnappers any leverage whatsoever.
Exactly. It all comes down to a deeply ingrained psychological mechanism called reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Yeah. The FBI was operating with a strict, inflexible tit-for-tat mentality.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
Meaning, in their procedural minds, if they called the kidnappers and asked for something, even something as basic as proof of life, they would instantly owe the kidnappers something in return.
Ah, I see.
Right. If you make an ask and the counterpart grants it, this invisible ledger ticks over, you are in debt.
And in the high-stakes world of kidnapping, failing to pay a debt is considered bad faith.
Precisely. And bad faith usually results in a dead hostage.
I see the flaw there immediately. Like if I ask for the dog's name or, the classic movie trope where they ask, what is Martin's dad's middle name?
Right, right.
I'm basically doing the kidnapper's homework for them.
Yep.
They just walk over the hostage, point a gun, get the answer, and lay it back. It happens instantly.
Exactly.
And I've gained zero tactical advantage. I haven't learned anything about the room they are in, their state of mind, or the actual health of the hostage.
None of that.
But because they gave me the answer, I'm suddenly the one on the hook. I owe them a favor.
That is a perfect deduction. Those traditional security questions require literally zero effort from the counterpart.
Right.
Furthermore, asking highly specific biographical questions is a dead giveaway that law enforcement is coaching the family.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it makes kidnappers incredibly nervous and paranoid, which just heightens their defensive state.
That makes total sense.
But you hit on the most critical point. It triggers what the source calls the human reciprocity gene.
The reciprocity gene. Think about how universally this applies to everyday life, far outside of, like, a jungle hostage situation.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Right. If you are at work and you ask a colleague for a favor, maybe just to cover your portion of a Zoom call for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
the moment they say yes, you instantly feel that invisible ledger tick over. You owe them one.
You do.
Or think about holiday guilt trips. A relative brings you an unexpected gift, and suddenly you feel this overwhelming, agonizing pressure to find something to give them in return.
Or else you feel like a terrible person.
Exactly. It's hardwired into our brains to balance the social skills.
It really is. It's not just a social norm. It is actually an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Really?
Yeah, when early humans shared resources, an unspoken debt was created to ensure group cohesion.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So when someone gives you something, even a tiny piece of information, they subconsciously feel they have made a concession. They will absolutely wait for you to pay them back.
And the FBI knew this.
They did. They understood reciprocity perfectly, but their reaction to it was entirely defensive.
So because the FBI was terrified of owing a debt to terrorists and terrified of having to make a concession they couldn't afford, they just stopped asking.
Precisely. They were positive the Burnhams were alive based on intel, so they convinced themselves they didn't need to formally ask for proof of life.
Wow.
They were simply afraid of the cost of asking.
Right.
And the result was a completely paralyzed standoff. Both sides wanted to extract value from the other, but neither side wanted to give anything away to initiate the exchange.
So it wasn't communication at all?
No, it was just two sides flexing their leverage in a vacuum. It was a standoff born out of procedural pride and fear.
Okay, so the burning question for the behavioral science guys at the FBI became, how do we communicate? How do we gather vital intelligence and get what we need without triggering that reciprocity gene?
Yes.
How do we ask for something without immediately owing something back? And the answer to that incredibly complex psychological puzzle came from the most unlikely, frankly absurd source imaginable.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Yeah, we are moving from the high-stakes political quagmire of the Philippines to the gritty streets of Pittsburgh.
This is truly one of the most remarkable pivots in the entire history of modern negotiations.
Seriously.
To figure out how to bypass this hardwired human instinct that has existed for millennia, the FBI found their inspiration from a Pittsburgh drug dealer.
I genuinely laughed out loud reading this part of the source material.
Right.
You cannot make this up. The FBI, with its billions in funding, its behavioral science units, its phalanxes of psychologists, gets completely schooled by a street-level drug dealer.
It's incredible.
So here's the setup. A drug dealer in Pittsburgh has his girlfriend kidnapped by a rival drug dealer.
Okay.
And in a moment of surprisingly good judgment, the victim drug dealer decides not to handle it himself, but actually goes to the FBI for help.
Which is rare, but good for him.
Yeah. So you have these suit and tie FBI negotiators riding around in an unmarked car with this local drug dealer while he is on his cell phone negotiating with the kidnapper.
Now, normally, the standard operating procedure would be for the FBI to heavily script the person on the phone.
Right.
They would feed them those bulletproof, closed-ended proof-of-life questions we just discussed. They would tell the dealer, ask what the girlfriend's childhood teddy bear was named.
Right, the classic move.
But this drug dealer hadn't been formally coached yet. The phone rings unexpectedly, he answers it, and before the FBI agents in the backseat can stop him, he just blurts out his own unfiltered question to the kidnapper.
He says, and I quote, "Hey, dog, how do I know she's all right?"
And what happens next is the pivotal moment that reshaped everything.
What happens?
There is 10 seconds of dead silence on the line.
Oh, wow.
And 10 seconds in a kidnapping negotiation is an absolute eternity.
It must feel like hours.
Exactly. The kidnapper is completely taken aback. His mental script has just been interrupted. And then his hostile tone completely drops and he says, well, I'll put her on the phone.
I mean, that is just incredible.
Yeah.
The FBI spends years trying to force kidnappers to provide proof of life. And this guy gets the kidnapper to volunteer to put the victim on the phone.
He didn't demand it at all.
No. He didn't say, put her on the phone or the deal is off. He didn't ask a security question. He just asked, how do I know she's all right?
Right.
It's a complete conversational judo flip. Instead of making a demand and asserting dominance, the dealer just took his problem, handed it across the table, and made it the kidnapper's problem to solve.
It is a monumental victory, and we really have to deconstruct exactly why it works so beautifully on a psychological level.
Let's do it.
So the drug dealer didn't ask a closed-ended question. He didn't ask for a specific verifiable fact. He asked a how question.
And how is the magic bullet?
Yeah.
But what is actually happening in the brain of the kidnapper, or really anyone you say this to when you use the word how?
When you ask someone how to do something, you are implicitly asking for their help.
Oh.
You are engaging their prefrontal cortex, their problem-solving faculties.
Yeah.
You are deferring to their authority and their expertise in that specific moment.
Right, right.
So the kidnapper felt entirely in control of the situation because it was his brilliant idea to put the girlfriend on the phone to solve this poor, helpless drug dealer's problem.
Oh, that is brilliant. And because it was the kidnapper's idea, the drug dealer doesn't owe him a damn thing.
Exactly.
The reciprocity gene is completely bypassed. If I ask you for a favor and you grant it, I owe you.
Yep.
But if I ask you for advice on how to solve a problem and you volunteer a solution out of your own free will,
Yeah.
you didn't give me a concession.
No, you didn't.
You just decided to do something to show off your own control over the situation. This single, accidental moment in a car in Pittsburgh is the birth of what the FBI now calls the calibrated, open-ended question.
Exactly. It completely reframes the power dynamic without the other side even realizing it.
Yeah.
The secret to gaining the upper hand in a negotiation isn't asserting your own dominance. It is actually giving the other side the illusion of control.
The illusion of control.
Right. The kidnapper thought he was calling all the shots and dictating the terms, but the drug dealer accidentally but effectively was the one defining the entire boundary of the conversation.
So we know how questions work miracles.
Right.
But to really wield them effectively, we have to look under the hood.
Yeah, we have to understand the mechanics.
Right. What is the foundational psychology that makes us resist each other in the first place, and why does an illusion of control disarm it?
Right.
To understand this, the source introduces a fascinating concept from a psychologist named Kevin Dutton.
Yes, Dutton explores a concept he eloquently calls unbelief.
Unbelief.
And unbelief is not just, passive skepticism or doubt. It is active, energetic resistance.
Interesting.
It is the complete reflexive rejection of whatever the other side is saying simply because they are the ones saying it.
Yeah.
And in almost any negotiation, argument, or conflict, that is exactly where both parties start. They are heavily entrenched in unbelief.
It's that familiar "I right, you're wrong, and I'm not going to listen to a single word you say" mindset.
Exactly.
It's two hard skulls banging against each other, just like the disastrous situation we saw with the government posturing in Dos Palmas. Both sides are trying to impose their point of view by force.
Right. And Dutton argues that persuasion is almost never about getting people to believe what you say.
Really?
Yeah. That is far too heavy a lift when someone is in a state of active resistance. Instead, true persuasion is simply about getting them to stop unbelieving.
Getting them to stop unbelief.
Yes, it is about removing the friction so that their natural momentum can carry them forward.
Okay, think of it like riding a horse.
Okay, I like that.
If a 1,000-pound animal wants to go left, and you stand on the ground in front of it and try to physically push it to the right, you are going to get trampled.
Oh, absolutely.
That pushing is you fighting their unbelief. But if you get in the saddle and ride left with the horse, aligning with its momentum, you can subtly tug the reins.
Right.
You use the horse's own energy to eventually steer it in a wide arc back to the right.
That's a great way to visualize it.
And to illustrate how this looks in a human conversation, the text shares an incredible anecdote about a medical student and a senior physician.
Oh, this scenario perfectly demonstrates how to get in the saddle and suspend unbelief in a high-stress, everyday situation.
Tell us what happened.
So a medical student is dealing with a patient in a hospital who is absolutely furious.
Okay.
The patient's critical biopsy results are days late. He is sick of waiting in a sterile room, so he physically rips out his IV, packs his bags, and is literally storming down the hallway to leave the hospital.
Now, the natural instinct of the medical student, or frankly any hospital staff worried about liability, is to stand in front of the horse.
Right.
They say, "Sir, you can't leave. It's against medical advice. You are sick. You have to stay."
Which, of course, just creates a showdown.
Yeah, it's a wall of unbelief. You can't leave versus "watch me."
You are pushing the horse.
But then a senior physician walks into the hallway.
Right.
And he doesn't issue a command. He doesn't assert his medical authority at all.
What does he do?
He offers the patient a glass of water, asks if they can chat for just a minute, and explicitly validates the patient's anger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He acknowledges that the delay is incredibly frustrating and promises to check on the lab himself. He rides with the horse.
Right.
But then he uses a calibrated question. He asks the patient what he hopes to achieve by leaving.
Oh.
What is so important about leaving the hospital right now?
And the patient, instead of fighting the doctor, actually explains the underlying issue.
He says he has errands to run, he has life stuff, bills to pay, family things to handle that he simply can't do while trapped in a hospital bed waiting for a lab tech.
Notice what the doctor did there. He didn't judge the errands.
No.
He didn't tell the patient that his errands were less important than his potential cancer diagnosis. That would be triggering unbelief again.
Yeah, that would be pushing the horse.
Exactly. He simply offered to connect the patient with hospital concierge services that could help him get those errands done while he waited comfortably for the results.
That's amazing.
And the result. Boom! The patient voluntarily turns around, unpacks his bags, and decides to stay.
He suspended the patient's unbelief.
He really did.
He took the bravado and the resistance completely out of the situation. By asking for the patient's goal and offering to help him achieve it, he gave the patient the illusion of control.
Right.
The patient felt like he was making the autonomous, independent choice to stay, rather than being imprisoned by the hospital staff.
This raises an important question, though, which I'm sure many listeners are pondering right now.
That's that.
In a tough negotiation, especially in, like, a cutthroat business environment, doesn't asking for help make you look weak?
Right.
Doesn't it make you look vulnerable to admit to your counterpart that you don't know how to proceed?
I can totally relate to that fear.
Yeah.
Like if I'm trying to buy a car and the dealer gives me a high price and I say, how am I supposed to afford this?
Yeah.
It feels like I'm showing my belly. It feels like I'm admitting I have no leverage and giving them permission to just walk all over me.
What's fascinating about human psychology is that the exact opposite is true.
Really?
Yeah. When you ask for help from a position of calm, respectful authority, it actually flatters your counterpart's ego.
Oh.
You are explicitly acknowledging their power, their resources, or their expertise in the situation.
Okay.
You are saying, you hold the cards, I recognize that, so how do we solve this?
Right.
It disarms their defense mechanisms. It gives them the illusion of control, but you are the one framing the entire architecture of the conversation.
You're the architect drawing the blueprints. They just think they are in charge because they get to pick the color of the paint.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so now that we deeply understand the psychology, bypassing the reciprocity gene, suspending unbelief by riding the horse, and flattering the ego with the illusion of control, it is time to build the actual toolkit.
Let's do it.
Let's get into the granular mechanics of calibrating these questions. How do we construct these magical phrases in our daily lives?
Let's examine a real-world corporate example provided in the text.
Okay.
There was a PR consultant who was working for a massive multinational corporation. It is the classic David and Goliath scenario.
Sure.
She is a sole proprietor, and this massive corporation is simply not paying her bills. Her invoices are piling up for months, they owe her a ton of money, but the corporate contacts keep stringing her along by promising lucrative future work.
Ugh, the worst.
They tell her, just keep working, the check is in the mail, there's a massive campaign coming next quarter.
And she is feeling completely trapped and desperate, I imagine.
Totally.
She wants to demand her money, to threaten a lawsuit, but she is terrified that if she plays hardball, Goliath will just squash her.
Yeah, that's a real fear.
They'll fire her, lawyer up, and she'll never see a dime of what she's owed. So she seeks out the negotiator for advice, and he tells her to use the ultimate calibrated question.
Right.
He instructs her to get on the phone with the client, summarize the situation calmly without anger, and then ask one simple question. How am I supposed to do that?
And her initial reaction to this advice is pure terror.
Oh, I bet.
She thinks, if I say, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
They will just shrug and say, we don't care, figure it out, or you're fired.
Because she was hearing the question internally as an accusation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
She thought it sounded like a passive-aggressive way of saying, you're screwing me out of money and it has to stop.
That is such a crucial linguistic distinction. Changing the phrase, you're screwing me out of money, to how am I supposed to do that, completely alters the reality of the room.
It really does.
The implication of you're treating me unfairly is still there in her mind. But if she delivers the question calmly, with a genuinely deferential tone, the client won't hear an accusation.
No, they won't.
Their defensive shields won't go up. Instead, they will hear a practical problem that requires their brilliant expertise to solve.
So she finally gathers the courage to test the theory.
Okay, what happens?
The corporate client calls her with yet another urgent request for more unpaid work. She takes a breath, summarizes the backlog of unpaid invoices, and softly asks, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
And the client's response is astonishing. He pauses, the dynamic shifts, and he says, you're right, you can't, and I apologize.
Wow.
He explains they're having internal accounting software issues, gives her a direct contact in the finance department, and her entire backlog is paid in full within 48 hours.
That's almost alchemy. Without accusing them, without threatening them, she forced this giant faceless corporation to look at her problem and volunteer the exact solution she desperately wanted.
It's amazing.
So, what are the strict linguistic rules for building questions that have this kind of psychological power? The text lays out some very specific guidelines that we need to master.
The first and most critical rule is to eliminate closed-ended verbs from your negotiation vocabulary.
Closed-ended verbs.
Yes, you must avoid words like can, is, are, do, or does.
Okay, let's do a quick dynamic role play to show exactly why that matters.
Sounds good.
Let's say you are a contractor who is behind schedule on my kitchen, and I am the frustrated homeowner. If I use a closed-ended verb and say to you, can you finish the cabinets by Friday?
I can simply look at you and say no.
Right.
And the conversation hits a brick wall. I don't have to explain my supply chain issues. I don't have to offer an alternative timeline. And because I gave you a hard no, we are immediately back to a showdown.
You are going to push back, and we are wrestling again.
Yeah.
Exactly. I gave you an easy out. I want to avoid those yes-no dead ends.
Right.
Instead, the text says we should use the classic reporter's questions,
Right.
but with a major caveat. The absolute best questions start exclusively with what and how.
What and how?
Yeah. These two words force the human brain to think expansively and collaboratively.
What and how are the absolute gold standard of negotiation. They inherently remove the aggression.
Yeah.
You also want to generally avoid who, when, and where, because just like closed-ended verbs, they usually just result in a factual one-word answer without prompting any deeper thought or joint problem solving.
Right.
But the biggest, reddest warning label the negotiator provides is regarding the word why.
Yes. Treat the word why like a glowing red burner on a hot stove. Do not touch it.
Right.
The text points out a fascinating quirk of human linguistics. No matter what language you are speaking, no matter the culture, the word why is universally perceived as accusatory.
Think about the neurological response. Since you were a toddler, when someone asked, why did you do that, you were in trouble.
Always.
Your immediate reflexive response to the word why is to defend yourself. You feel attacked. Even if the person meant it completely innocently, it triggers a defensive posture in the amygdala.
That is so true.
But you can take a harsh question like, why did you do it, and effortlessly calibrate it to what caused you to do it.
Oh, that's much better.
Suddenly, you've taken the personal emotion completely out of it. You are asking for an analysis of objective factors rather than attacking their personal character.
It shifts the focus from you to the situation.
Exactly.
The only time the text suggests using why is if you are playing 4D chess and specifically want to weaponize that defensiveness to work for you.
Right.
For example, if you're pitching a client, you might ask, why would your company ever switch from your current reliable vendor and take a risk on choosing us?
Oh, that's sneaky.
Right. By asking why they would do it, you are forcing them to articulate and defend the very change you want them to make. They end up pitching you to themselves.
It's a very high-level move.
It is, but generally, for daily conflicts, strictly stick to what and how.
Because calibrated what and how questions offer absolutely no target for attack.
Yeah.
If you make a declarative statement saying, you are being unfair, your counterpart can attack the statement. They say, no, I'm not, and here is why.
Right.
But if you ask a softly calibrated question, what about this arrangement is important to you, there is physically nothing for them to attack.
That's brilliant.
You are merely requesting their esteemed input. You are educating them on the contours of the problem without ever pointing a finger.
There's a brilliant example of this in the text involving the negotiator's own boss at the FBI.
Oh, I love this story.
The negotiator had been officially approved to go to a prestigious executive program at Harvard. The day before his flight, his boss calls him into his office and starts questioning the validity of the trip. The boss is basically power tripping, trying to show who is the alpha dog by threatening to cancel the trip at the last possible minute.
It's a classic corporate dominance display.
Very classic.
And the negotiator recognizes the psychology immediately. Now, his instinct might be to argue the merits of the trip again.
Sure.
He might want to say, but you already signed the paperwork, it's paid for. But doing that would be directly challenging the boss's authority. It would be pushing the horse.
Instead, he sits calmly, looks at his boss, and asks, when you originally approved this trip, what did you have in mind?
It is a masterclass in calibration.
It really is.
He explicitly acknowledges the boss's power when you originally approved, and then gently nudges the boss to explain his own past rationale. The boss physically relaxes, his defense mechanisms power down, he steeples his fingers, which is a classic body language sign of feeling superior and in control, and simply says, just make sure you brief everyone when you get back.
The negotiator gets his trip, and the boss gets to feel like the benevolent king of the castle. The illusion of control and action.
Exactly.
Okay, instead of just listing the standby questions from the text, let's actually role-play how a few of them disarm everyday situations.
Let's do.
Let's say I'm an employee who feels completely overwhelmed by my workload, and you are my demanding manager handing me yet another project.
All right. I walk up to your desk and say, I need this 50-page market analysis on my desk by tomorrow morning.
If I say, I can't do that, I'm too busy, you'll just tell me to work late.
Right.
But if I use standby question number 1, I'd look at my current stack of work, look at you, and ask, how would you like me to proceed with these other 3 urgent projects you gave me yesterday?
As the manager, I am instantly stopped in my tracks.
Yeah.
You haven't refused the work, you haven't complained, you have simply taken the reality of your limited time and made it my logistical problem to solve.
Exactly.
I now have to prioritize the work for you, which is what I should have done in the first place.
Exactly. Let's do another one. We are negotiating a salary for a new job, and you offer me a number that is way below market rate.
Okay. Our absolute best offer for this role is $60,000.
Instead of just saying that's too low, which creates an impasse, I'd use standby question number 2. What is it about my background that led you to that specific valuation?
That is incredibly disarming.
Right.
It forces me, the hiring manager, to either justify a lowball offer using your resume, which is hard to do if you actually qualified, or it forces me to admit that it's just a strict budget constraint.
Which opens the door for negotiating other perks like vacation time or remote work.
Exactly. You didn't attack my offer, you asked for my analytical reasoning.
It's conversational judo. You are constantly engineering a situation where your surmily stubborn counterpart is now using their own mental and emotional energy to overcome your challenges.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
And this is a massive flashing neon, but there is a catch.
A big catch.
All of this brilliant linguistic jujitsu, all the calibrated questions in the world are completely useless if you mess up the delivery. This brings us to the final and most crucial element of the deep dive, the ultimate prerequisite. Emotional regulation.
This section serves as a vital warning label for the listener.
Yeah.
You can have the perfect script, you can memorize every calibrated question, but if your internal physiological state is a mess, the technique will absolutely fail.
To illustrate this, the source shares a deeply painful story about a freelance marketing strategist.
Okay.
She is dealing with a new CEO at a client company, and this CEO is a nightmare.
Let me guess, super controlling.
Oh, incredibly. He is an arrogant penny pitcher who wants to offshore all the marketing work, and worse, he's a male chauvinist who openly dislikes her assertive communication style.
The dynamic is toxic from the very first interaction.
Very.
They're constantly clashing on conference calls in that passive-aggressive, thinly veiled corporate style. Finally, the strategist has had enough.
Right.
She invoices him for her final $7,000 of completed work and tries to walk away from the contract.
And what does he do?
The CEO responds by saying her bill is unjustified, he decides he will only pay half, and then he completely stops taking her calls.
It is typical textbook bully behavior. He doesn't like being questioned, especially by a woman who doesn't back down.
Exactly.
So the strategist, desperate for her money, goes to the FBI negotiator for help. They sit down and meticulously craft an absolute masterpiece of a script.
It's brilliant.
It's an 8-step process that hits every single psychological trigger we've discussed today. Let's walk through the mechanics of this script because it is brilliant.
Step 1 was defining the goal.
Yeah.
Simply getting the CEO on the phone and getting him to agree to pay the $7,000.
Right?
Step 2 utilized a no-oriented email to break the silence. Instead of asking, "Can we talk?" she wrote, "Have you given up on settling this amicably?"
Which is brilliant because people love saying no to feel safe.
Right.
Saying no, I haven't given up forces him to re-engage.
Exactly. Step 3 was to summarize the situation objectively. Step 4 was labeling his suspected emotions to diffuse them, saying something like, "It seems like you feel this invoice doesn't reflect the value you received."
Yeah.
Step 5 deployed the calibrated questions to get him to reveal his thinking. How does this bill violate our original agreement?
Notice how she isn't defending her work. She is making him defend his refusal to pay based on the contract.
Right. Step 6 was bending his reality with a flattering label. It seems like you're the type of executive who prides himself on doing business fairly and honoring agreements.
Well, right.
Step 7 was the implementation phase, asking how he intended to resolve it. And step 8 was this rule of 3, getting him to agree to the solution 3 different times in the conversation to ensure he wouldn't back out.
The negotiator notes that scripts like this, in his decades of experience, have a 90% success rate.
90%.
It is as close to a sure thing as you can get in human psychology.
Yeah.
But it only works if the negotiator stays calm and rational.
And that's the hard part.
Right. So The strategist sends the first email from step 2, and it works perfectly. The CEO is triggered by the "have you given up" question and calls her back within 10 minutes.
Okay, so far so good.
She's got him on the hook. The 8-step plan is in motion, and then it all completely falls apart.
Because the moment she answers the phone and hears his patronizing, arrogant voice, her anger flares uncontrollably.
Yep.
Her emotional regulation evaporates in a millisecond. She abandons the carefully crafted 8-step script entirely.
Oh, no.
Her only desire in that specific moment becomes the overwhelming emotional need to show him how he is wrong. She wants to impose her will.
She pushes the horse.
She turns it right back into a showdown.
And as a result, she got less than half her money. It was a complete, devastating failure.
Yeah.
So basically what the source is telling us is that our own brains are taking us hostage before the other person even does anything.
That is exactly what is happening on a neurobiological level. Yeah. To understand why this brilliant strategist failed, we have to look at the anatomy of the brain. When you are confronted with a threat, and to your brain, a patronizing tone or an unfair accusation is processed as a threat just as much as a physical predator, the fight-or-flight mechanism in your reptilian brain activates instantly.
The amygdala hijack.
Precisely. The amygdala sounds the alarm. Simultaneously, the limbic system, which processes raw emotion, goes into absolute overdrive.
Okay.
Your adrenal glands flood your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. And here's the mechanical problem. The brain only has so much blood flow and energy.
Oh, I see where this is going.
When the amygdala and limbic system flare up, they literally siphon resources away from the prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational, advanced part of your brain. Your neocortex is literally starved of oxygen and glucose.
So you physically, biologically lose access to the part of your brain that memorized the 8-step script.
You do.
You literally cannot access your higher reasoning. You revert to a caveman swinging a club, trying to win a wrestling match.
Psychologists call this adopting a hostage mentality. When people feel they are not in control or when they feel attacked, they react to that lack of power by either becoming extremely defensive or lashing out aggressively to reclaim dominance. You become a hostage to your own neurochemicals.
That is terrifying, but it makes so much sense why we ruin negotiations even when we know better.
It really does.
So how do we prevent this? How do we stop this chemical flood from starving our logic centers? The text offers some very practical, physical solutions to intercept the amygdala hijack.
The first and most foundational rule is to literally bite your tongue.
Bite your tongue.
Yes. You have to create physical space between the stimulus and your response. When you feel that hot surge of passion or anger rising in your chest, you must pause.
Right.
Do not speak. Give the neurochemicals a moment to dissipate. This lowers the chance of saying something you will regret and buys the necessary seconds for your neocortex to come back online.
There's a fascinating cultural example of this built-in pause in the text, the Japanese businessman technique.
Yes, it is common practice for top-tier Japanese executives when negotiating with foreign counterparts to use a translator, even if the Japanese executive understands and speaks English perfectly.
Right.
Now, why would they add that layer of friction? Because waiting for the translator to speak forces a mandatory physical and mental delay.
That's so smart.
It steps them back from the immediate emotional pressure of the conversation and gives their prefrontal cortex crucial seconds to frame a rational, strategically calibrated response rather than an emotional reaction.
It's institutionalized emotional regulation. I love that.
Me too.
Another rule the text gives is what to do when you are verbally assaulted in the moment. If someone attacks you, the instinct is to counterattack. But the rule is, do not strike back. Instead, disarm them by asking a calibrated question. If a client yells, "Your work is garbage and you were robbing me," instead of yelling back, "I worked 60 hours on this," you take a breath, lower your voice, and calmly say, "What specifically about the deliverables is failing to meet your expectations?" You completely change the acoustic tenor of the conversation.
Or you can even offer a simple tactical apology to reset the neurobiology of the room.
Right.
You're right, I clearly missed the mark on this draft. The text notes an incredible physiological fact. If you hooked an armed, agitated kidnapper up to a cardiac monitor, you would find that every softly calibrated question, every calm, ego-stroking apology, literally lowers his heart rate a little bit.
Wow.
You are physiologically de-escalating the situation by refusing to trigger their fight-or-flight response.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's take a step back and look at the massive journey we've just been on.
It's been quite a ride.
We started in the tragic, literal firefights of the Philippine jungle, where the wrestling match mentality and the need to project dominance cost innocent lives.
Yeah.
We explored the paralyzing evolutionary fear of the reciprocity gene and how a Pittsburgh drug dealer accidentally cracked a psychological code by simply asking a how question.
Right.
We dove into the neurobiology of suspending unbelief by riding the horse, and we built a dynamic toolkit of calibrated questions that allow you to quietly guide a conversation while giving the other side the illusion of control.
And finally, we learned that none of this brilliant strategy works unless you can override the cortisol flood in your own brain. The ultimate takeaway here is a complete fundamental inversion of how we normally think about power in human interaction.
Yeah, it really is.
Think about it. Who actually has control in a conversation? The person doing the talking or the person doing the listening?
It has to be the listener.
Exactly.
Because the talker is expanding energy, revealing their internal thoughts, showing their cards, and making themselves vulnerable.
Right.
The listener, if they are employing these tools, is harnessing all of that energy. They are tugging the reins.
Right.
By asking calibrated what and how questions, you make the other person do the heavy lifting of solving your problems.
It is an incredibly empowering realization for everyday life. You do not have to be the loudest, most aggressive, or most dominant voice in the room to win the day.
No.
You don't need to be the silverback gorilla. You just have to be the most emotionally regulated, carefully calibrated listener.
But this brings us to one final provocative thought. Something for you, the listener, to mull over as you go about your day. Whether you're heading into a 9 a.m. status meeting or trying to get your kids to do their homework.
What's that?
The source material definitively proves that giving your counterpart the illusion of control is devastatingly effective against aggressive, egotistical, or untrained people.
Yeah, the terrorists, the bad bosses, the arrogant CEOs, they all fall for it because their egos demand it.
Exactly. But what happens to the dynamic of a conversation when both parties are highly trained in these exact behavioral science techniques?
That is the ultimate psychological chess match.
Right.
If two master negotiators are sitting across a table, both perfectly regulating their emotions, both simultaneously trying to give each other the illusion of control, who actually drives the outcome?
Think about that next time you are in a high-stakes conversation. How would you navigate a negotiation where your counterpart counters your beautifully delivered, how am I supposed to do that, with a perfectly calm, perfectly calibrated question of their own?
Do you just loop how questions until the end of time?
It's a fascinating paradox to consider. Until next time, keep diving deep.